Hey guys, welcome to Elevated Systems. I'm your host CJ, and a couple months ago I did a video where I tested 6 different Linux distros on my Framework laptop. At the end of the video I said I was going to do a more in-depth video on running Ubuntu on the Framework, and I have been daily driving Ubuntu 21.10 in a dual boot setup with Windows 11 since 21.10 was released. Now, trying to nail down a tutorial or guide on installing and setting up Ubuntu on the Framework hasn't been easy because with every update, something changes and the problems I've previously solved are now fixed. Now, this is a good thing for users, of course, and is the result of Framework and the various Linux developers working together to get the distros working smoothly with all the new hardware in this laptop. So rather than trying to hit a moving target, I'm just going to capture this very moment in time and take you through the dual boot installation process, setting up Ubuntu 21.10, identifying and solving some of the more significant compatibility problems, and then I'll take you through some tweaks to make everything run more smoothly and efficiently. Now, just like my last video, the target audience for this is the Linux beginner to intermediate user, so while there may be more advanced methods to solve the problems, I'll be outlining solutions that are better suited for the less advanced user to follow along with. So while we will be doing some command line work in the terminal, there won't be any tweaking and recompiling code or anything crazy like that. But before we can work with Ubuntu, we need to install Ubuntu. So you'll need a flash drive, at least 8 gigabytes, and the Ubuntu ISO file, which can be downloaded from this website here. All links will be in the description below, and we are going to download version 21.10. Now, to write Ubuntu to the flash drive, we need to download and install an app called Valencia Etcher, which can be found here. So go ahead and download that. Now, while Ubuntu is downloading, we can go ahead and install Etcher. So if I launch it. Now, once that Ubuntu ISO is finished downloading, go ahead and install your USB drive and launch Etcher. Now we want to click Flash from File, and I'm going to pick my Ubuntu image. Click Select Target and select the USB flash drive I just installed, and then just click Flash. Okay, now we have our installation media flashed, but before we install the OS, we want to check to see how much space we have to install it. So in the search box, just type in drive management and you'll see create and format disk partitions. Open that up. What you want to do in here is check to see how many partitions your boot drive is broken into, because during the Ubuntu install, we'll be creating new partitions for the Linux OS. With a typical Windows installation, you should just have 3 partitions, 2 smaller ones, and then the bulk of the boot drive should be your C drive essentially. Now, technically, you only need something like 15 gigabytes of available space to install Ubuntu, but I recommend at least 100 gigs if you have it. To check, just open up your file explorer, click on this PC, and then take a look at the amount of free space you have on your C drive. I have 191 gigs free, which is plenty. Now, a quick note on the Framework. You can install a Linux distro to the USB expansion storage cards, but these cards unfortunately have overheating issues, and that leads to significant performance problems with the OS. So once you've confirmed you have enough space on your boot drive, with the Ubuntu install flash drive inserted, restart the laptop and tap this F12 or Framework logo key until you get to this menu. Then just select your USB drive and hit enter. On this next menu, just hit enter for the top selection for a normal Ubuntu install. All right, this will bring up the install menu, and we're going to go ahead and install. And I'm going to pick all my appropriate settings. I'm going to go ahead and connect to the Wi-Fi. I'm going to select a normal installation, and I do want to download all the updates while I'm installing. Now here it's finally discovered that there's already a Windows install on this laptop. So it's asking me, do I want to install Ubuntu alongside Windows, or do I want to do a clean install of Ubuntu? At this point, I'm going to select install alongside Ubuntu so I can get that dual boot with Windows and Linux. Now the installers automatically broke up the Windows partition and the new Ubuntu partition to 149 gigabytes for Windows and 106 gigabytes for Ubuntu. Now to change that, I can just simply slide the partition down to right at 100 gigabytes and then just click install now. This is your final warning. Once you click continue, you're going to create new partitions on your boot drive. Who am I? My password is definitely not 1234. We'll let that installer do its thing. We'll be right back. Now, whenever you reboot or start up the laptop, you'll be greeted with a new boot option menu, which will allow you to select Ubuntu or Windows. There are also recovery and UEFI options. We'll select Ubuntu and when it starts for the very first time, you'll have a few more setup options to do. But most importantly, the software updater will pop up, which is informing you of all the updates that were downloaded during the installation because they weren't installed yet. We can see there's quite a bit. So that is the first thing we should do. So with all those updates, almost all the framework hardware is fully functional. And I'm gonna get to all that in a bit, but I'm shooting the screen right now to show you that first, the native resolution is working. You also have both normal scaling and fractional scaling. So you can dial in the scale to your preference. Also, the trackpad is working with all the multi-gesture support. But no, by default in Linux, it's a 2-finger tap for right-click functionality and a 3-finger tap for middle click. This can be changed. I'll also get to that in a bit later. However, one thing you may notice is as you're tracking around, your cursor may lag out or get stuck for a second. And if you've been exploring, you might also see some screen tearing when doing something like scrolling through a document or a website. And this is due to the panel self-refresh function not working properly. So that's the first thing we'll fix. And for the remainder of this video, I'll be switching to just a full 16:9 UHD screen capture at a larger scale. So it'll be easier to follow along if you're on maybe a smaller device. Okay, now most of the work we'll be doing from this part will be in the terminal. So first lesson, Control-Alt-T, that'll launch your terminal. Now, the first thing we want to address is the mouse lag issue, but depending on when you're watching this video, it may or may not be a problem. So if you don't notice you're lagging or freezing, don't worry. If you're not sure, type this into the terminal. Hit enter and you'll see the Linux kernel version Ubuntu is running right now. If it's 5.14 or higher, the problem's already solved. If it's lower, like the 5.13 version I have, then you'll probably have the PSR problem. Unfortunately, at the time of filming, just upgrading to a newer kernel isn't an option, as that just breaks other things. So to fix this problem, we need to edit some configuration settings. So type this command. Hit enter, type in your password. Note that you won't see any characters while you're typing in your password. Hit enter, and now you're gonna open up a text file in your terminal. We want to go down with the arrow key to this line right here. And right after splash, want to space and type in this. Once your text looks like this, press Control-O, enter to save, and Control-X to exit. Next, apply the changes you made by typing this. The only other hardware issue is with the 3.5mm headset jack not accepting microphone input, so we have one more file to edit. Again, type hit enter, and again we've opened up another text file. Go ahead and scroll all the way down to the last line, and at the bottom add this text. Okay, once you have the text input, again, hit Control O, enter to save, and Control X to exit. And again, to apply this change, we're gonna reboot, enter. Now, the only other hardware issue you may run into is with the fingerprint reader. Now, the update that ran after setup enabled the fingerprint reader. So if we open up our settings, under users, if we unlock our settings here, put in our password, you can see that the fingerprint login is here and it's disabled. So if we enable this, if we try to scan a new fingerprint, again, password, you might see an error like this, or you might get another message like this, or even like this. This is occurring for me because I already have my fingerprint stored in the Windows operating system, and the fingerprint reader used by Framework can only be used by one operating system at a time, so you have to decide which one you want to use it with. Kind of a bummer. If I were to reboot into Windows, I could delete the Windows Hello Fingerprint login option there. Then I could come back here and enroll. So that's a decision you'll have to make. Now, the next significant issue with Ubuntu or most Linux distros on this laptop is the problem of power efficiency and battery life. And I did some extensive testing to find the best settings to get the best performance per watt on this i7-1165G7 version. To demonstrate, here's a simple chart, and as a testing metrics, I used a custom benchmark that simulated very typical productivity tasks, things like converting documents into PDFs, resizing and rotating photos, nothing unrealistic or overly demanding. I set the power mode to balanced power, set the screen brightness to the lowest setting, deactivated the idle functions to simulate continual work on the system. Now, the laptop with the default Ubuntu install completed the test in 40 minutes with a 20% battery drain, resulting in 30% drain per hour, or about 3 hours and 18 minutes of continuous light to moderate work from a full charge. Unfortunately, we take a 5% performance hit and increased battery use by 13.3% just by disabling PSR. Unfortunately for now, that's unavoidable. The best power savings is attained by enabling power save mode in settings. However, that also results in a 78.5% loss in performance, which is noticeable even in simple tasks like web browsing and office work. Even with a 53% bump in battery life, this still results in poor performance per watt. To split the difference, I installed an app called TLP, which only gave us a 17.6% performance hit while bumping battery life up by 29.4%. I also tested PowerTop, a utility I've used in the past, and I've seen threads on it in the Framework forums. However, it didn't lead to any significant gains. With AutoTune enabled, it did return performance to pre-PSR fixed levels, but only reduced battery draw by 1%, while enabling both PowerTop and TLP led to a 50% performance hit while only saving less than 1% battery over TLP alone. PowerTop does show some efficiency during system idle and standby, but I have a different solution for that. So my testing shows that just installing TLP is the best option. I'll show you how to do this, but for those curious, in Windows 10 using the same power settings, the benchmark took the same 40 minutes, so same performance as the fresh Ubuntu install, but it did it using only 11% of the battery. Let's go ahead and install TLP. So again, hit Control-Alt-T for your terminal. And first we need to update the repository. So type sudo apt update password and enter. Since this is a fresh install and we've done the update, you can see all packages are up to date. If there's a number here that says a number of packages need to be updated, it's always a good practice to go ahead and apply the update. If you needed to do that, the command would be sudo apt upgrade. Of course, we had nothing to upgrade here, but we are going to go ahead and install that TLP. So enter this command. Yes, to install it, and it's installed. And to make life a little easier, we're going to install a user interface to manage the TLP settings. First, we need to add the repository this new app lives in, so type in this. enter, hit enter to install it. Okay, and now just a sudo apt update again to make sure we got that update repository updated, and then we'll install this UI. So it's sudo apt install tlpui, and that's it. So now if we go into our applications, scroll here, we can see that TLPUI is installed. If we open this under the general tab, we'll see that TLP is enabled. The default mode is battery, as we only need it to work when the laptop is on battery mode. Now, I've done a lot of testing with different settings. Most of the settings in here are already controlled through Ubuntu's power settings, like shutting down Wi-Fi and Bluetooth to save power. The only setting I found to have a significant effect on power use without significantly hindering performance is here under the PCIe tab, and under here under our active state power management, we can change this from default to super save. Now just click save, confirm our changes, type in our password. That's it. That alone should give you about 50% or more battery life, depending on your workload. But the biggest issue I've had with Ubuntu on the framework is the excessive power draw while suspended. Because the Intel Tiger Lake CPU doesn't support deep sleep and there's no hibernate option in Ubuntu, suspend is the only system idle option available here. That's all that's available. So depending on your setup and what programs you have open, the battery drain in suspend can be up to 5% an hour or more. That's not great. So I'm going to take you through the process of enabling suspend then hibernate option. So when you close the lid, the laptop will suspend for 2 hours and then go into hibernation mode and essentially stop draining the battery. Now, this is the most complicated set of operations in this tutorial for beginners, so I recommend watching the process first, and if you're not comfortable attempting it, that's okay. My recommendation is then, if you're going to suspend the laptop for more than an hour or two, just save your work and shut it down instead. There are several steps to get this done, and first is to create a new swap file, which is an area of the SSD where the data in the RAM will move to when the laptop hibernates. Now, if you followed the first part of this video and did a normal Ubuntu install, you should have a 2 GB swap file, but to confirm, in your terminal again, type in /h, and this should show you your total amount of RAM installed and then your swap file. And you can see I do have the default 2 GB swap file. The first thing we need to do is turn off and then delete this small swap file. So enter this command. Enter, and now this. Now let's make a new larger swap file, and a couple things to keep in mind here is first, the file needs to be at least as big as the amount of memory you have installed, and second, you need to have at least that much room on your SSD. So let's go ahead and make that new bigger swap file, and you can enter this command. Now here, the count equals the size of your RAM in gigabytes multiplied by 1024. So 32 gigs of RAM times 1024, I'll type 32768. For you, again, just multiply the amount of RAM you have by 1024. That's the number you'll enter here. Hit enter, give it a few seconds. And we see here that it did that. Our new swap file is created. So now we have to give it some permission. So here's the next command. And now we need to let Ubuntu know that this is in fact the swap file. And finally, let's turn the swap back on. Now we're done. Now we just need a reboot again. All right, once we're back in, again, hit Control-Alt-T to open up that terminal. And let's just double check our swap file. So again, /h, you can see that my swap file matches my memory size. So with that in place, we need to again edit the grub file, but we need some info first. So enter this, hit enter, and one of the first things we need is this UUID number. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna highlight just this number, right click and copy it. Now I'm gonna go down here to my applications. In the search, I'm gonna type in gedit, and I'm gonna open up my text editor. And in the first line, I'm gonna type in UUID equals, and then just a Control V to type in that number that I just copied. Now I'll return to my terminal, and I need one more piece of information. So type in this, password, enter. This is gonna give me a long block of numbers, but if I go up here to this top row, this number right here under physical offset, yours will be different than mine, but what I wanna do is just highlight the numbers. Again, right click and copy, open my text editor back up, and in the next line, I'm just gonna put offset equals, and then Control V to paste that number in. That's the two pieces of information you need. Again, I'm gonna clear my terminal so it's not so cluttered. Now it's time to update that bootloader again, so. All right, and then we wanna go back to that same line we edited earlier. And right here after quiet splash, gonna space, and I'm gonna enter this text. And now here, I can open up my text editor. I can grab that UUID number. Again, I'm gonna hit Control C to copy it back into my terminal, and then just right click and paste, and then continue. So resume offset equals, and now again, get that second number, copy that, back into the terminal, right click and paste. So I got that text input. Once I'm good to go, again, Control O, enter, Control X. And anytime I make any changes to the grub file or the bootloader, I need to update it. Okay, now I need to create a new resume file, and I can do that with my nano editor the same way, just by identifying the location and the name, which will be resume. I hit enter, I have a new blank file, and I'm gonna enter the same information I just entered before. So it's the resume ID, and then I can, again, my text file is still open, so I'll go and copy my UUID again, right click and paste it in here, and my resume offset. Once I have that in, Control O to write it out, enter to save, Control X to exit, and now I do have to update this, so and this will take a few seconds. We need to reboot the system again. Okay, now before we move on, I'm going to test out my hibernation function, make sure it's working. So I'm just going to open up a couple of applications here. I'll open up my Firefox. I'll open up the store. And then in my terminal, I'm going to type in this command. And this should send my laptop into hibernation mode, and you'll know it goes into hibernation mode if the power LED turns completely off, which mine just did. I'll just kind of give it a second here, and I'll hit the power button to power it back on. And the system should power back on with all our working documents and tabs open. And it did. Now, unfortunately, as is, the only way to enter hibernation is by entering this command into the terminal anytime you want to hibernate. So for the final step, we're going to change the lid close behavior to suspend, then hibernate. So another file to edit. File it, enter, and now we're going to tab all the way down and find this line right here, handle lid switch. And what we want to do is I want to delete that hash, and then I'm going to change suspend to suspend, then hibernate. Now I can, again, Control O, enter this save, and Control X. One final time, we want to reboot. Okay, now when you close the lid, the laptop will suspend for 2 hours and then it'll hibernate. So instead of losing 5% of battery per hour, you'll only see about a 5% battery drain in a 24-hour period. The last thing I want to quickly show you is the Gnome Tweaks. So open your app store and we just want to search for Tweaks. This is the app right here. Once you get to this app, go ahead and open it up, and we're just going to install this. Now, this is technically an application for Gnome 3. However, despite any errors that you might get when you're installing this, it does work on the Gnome 40 desktop environment that we have on Ubuntu. So now that it's installed, go ahead and close out your store, open up your apps, and just search for Tweaks, and here it is. And now you're going to see we have many areas where you can tweak your user experience on Ubuntu. Now, some of them have been overridden by the changes we've made, such as the suspend when laptop is closed. But you can go ahead and take a look at all these different options that you have. You can change themes, font types, lots of different things. But the one thing I want to show you is our touchpad. And as we have it set up right now, you can see that we have it by default. It's the touchpad, 2 fingers for right click, 3 fingers for middle click. However, if you want to change it more to be like the Windows type, where you actually right click in the bottom or the middle of the touchpad, you can change it here. Because on a dual boot system, having continuity in your input controls is nice, but I've actually changed it in Windows to the double and triple click like the default Linux setup, but to each their own. Okay, at this point, you should have a fully functional and tweaked Ubuntu operating system living in harmony with Windows on your framework laptop. Now, I've been asked about running either Windows or Linux as your primary OS and the other in a virtual machine, and yes, that is an option. However, I do it this way and sacrifice the convenience of moving between the desktops with just a click, because running each OS on the bare metal, so to speak, each operating system has full access to all the system resources with no need to share anything except the storage space. To me, it's just a better option on a 4-core system. But if you have any other questions, let me know in the comments below. While you're there, be sure to hit that like. It does help get this content out to more people with similar interests. And if this is a topic that interests you, maybe consider subscribing, as I'll be doing more guides just like this for other distros. I was actually about to get started on Linux Mint, but while working on this video, I saw a post on the framework forum that Mint is now 100% working out of the box, so maybe that's not necessary. So what distro do you want to see a guide like this for? Let me know, and I hope to see you in the next one. Until then, stay safe.